speaking of not actually getting that much better, the Detroit Pistons were active this offseason. That is the best segue that I'm going to do in this episode. Um, so yeah, the planning doc for this episode, we just have the Pistons. I mean, what the hell? Like they were active. They gave, what was it, Jeremy Grant 2 years, 20 mil. No, 3 years, 60 mil. Mason Plumlee, I think, got 3 years, 25.
Mm-hmm.
They lost Christian Wood. They traded Luke Kennard. They
They
still
traded
have
they traded Bruce Brown, who's also like a pretty good role player.
yeah. Um, so obviously, the easy reaction here is to be like, "What the hell are we doing?" Um, I actually like. I think there is some semblance of logic here. It's flawed, but there is some kind of like thought here.
Mm-hmm. I want to hear it.
I think. Okay, so I think the Jeremy Grant contract is a lot. I think you see 3 years, 60 mil for Jeremy Grant, and immediately say that is too much. And you might be right. But I think if you're the GM of the Detroit Pistons, you say, okay, yeah, we've got Jeremy Grant here, 39% three-point shooter, like can space the floor, can guard across the front court. Like that's a kind of skill set that you're going to need to pay money for. Like he can rim protect, but also kind of do some wing guarding. Like he was guarding LeBron for significant amounts of time last year in the Western Conference Finals. So I think like that's the kind of skill set that's just going to cost you money. And you're a bad team. Like you're going to kind of need to overpay a little bit. The reports were that they promised him an increased offensive role, which, like, I guess, I don't know, his peripheral offensive numbers were good. Like, obviously, his shooting numbers are good. He's only taking 3 threes a game right now. If you just get him taking like 1 or 2 more, the scoring numbers go up.
Mm-hmm.
And he's immediately the best wing / like stretch 4 or 5 they have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, the Jeremy Grant contract like is a little bit much, but I think he has a valuable skill set for them.
Yeah, I think it's just the questions come from the price tag, but as you say,
Yeah.
they're a bad team, not a desirable place to play. Detroit doesn't get big free agents.
No.
They only got Blake Griffin because of a trade. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to get guys to come there, so you got to pay up. Um,
When you do get one, yeah.
but I do wonder about this increased offensive role for Grant. I feel like I don't think of him as someone who can really create his own
No.
shot
No.
or dribble to drive. I feel like I'd have to go back and maybe really watch some Nuggets clips, but I feel like a lot of his scoring comes from like off cuts,
Yeah.
where he gets a pass from Jokic or Murray, um, getting just wide open threes.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot of off ball stuff. So I just
Yeah.
I don't know if you're. I mean, I'm curious to see what'll happen.
I think also if you look at this team, like you draft Killian Hayes this year, you have D Rose there, like there's room for a guy who can play off ball a lot, especially now that Luke Kennard is not one of the guys that's playing off the ball a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of agree with you though. Like I don't look at Jeremy Grant and immediately say like, oh, that's a guy who like they give him some more touches. He could really be creating offense. Like he seems like an offensive player that needs to be facilitated for, as opposed to a facilitator.
Hmm.
Um, Speaking of facilitating though, they signed Mason Plumlee. Do I have the
Yes.
correct brother? Yes. Mason Plumlee. I'm sure that's going to be an ongoing game on this show. Guess that Plumlee brother.
Are
It's
the
like
other
who's that?
two, are the other two in the league still?
Marshall absolutely is not. I don't think he ever was. Because the thing with the Plumlees was Duke only really wanted one of them. I think they only wanted Mason, but they gave Miles a scholarship to get Mason in the door.
Hmm.
And then that turned into also giving Marshall a scholarship because I guess they just loved that Plumlee energy.
One of them was a
But
Nick, right?
oh yes,
Which one
I
was?
believe that was Miles.
Okay.
Again though, guess that Plumlee brother.
Miles also
But
got paid a couple of summers ago, I think, for some
yeah,
reason.
was that the summer that everyone got paid? Like that
Probably.
2016, the cap jumped and money isn't a real thing anymore summer.
Yeah. Also,
Uh,
not to jump away from the Pistons, but
but
that I think it's odd that a lot of the contracts this year are a little reminiscent of that summer too.
Yeah.
Um, Especially with Grant, Gallinari, someone like Marcus Morris getting like $60 million, like
4 years, 64.
a lot of
A lot of money going around in a
money.
pandemic. Who was that Morris contract from? Was it the Clippers again?
Yeah, yeah, you got 4 years, 64 from the Clippers. Um, I mean, even like the Heat with their, I signed Myers Leonard to 2 years, 19 million. Like even something like that feels pretty inflated for 13th, 14th
Oh yeah,
guy.
that's a lot for Myers.
Yeah, um,
Especially when you consider like per year, Plumlee is going to be getting the same amount of money as Myers,
yeah.
basically. And
Now,
I would rather have Plumlee on my team. Like he's a guy who the Nuggets created offense through last year when Jokic went to the bench. Like obviously, very limited version of it, but still like a big who could kind of facilitate offense,
yeah,
which is a unique set.
I think we were trying to figure out what their starting lineup could be
Yeah.
last night, um, and we just we kind of landed on that. It looks like they're going to be doing some sort of Grant, Blake, Plumlee, 3-4-5,
Yep.
which just sounds like a disaster for spacing and
And
offense.
yes.
I suppose it could work defensively. Um, I guess if you're the Pistons and if you're Dwayne Casey, you're thinking like, okay, Blake and Miles,
Mason
Mason,
gets
Blake
that
and
Plumlee.
Mason can both pass.
Yeah.
They're both two bigs that can pass. Maybe that's what they're thinking here. Like this is like a unique kind of setup.
I like that though. Let's get some weird offenses in the NBA.
Yeah,
Like more teams need to be weird.
but that would look a lot better if they had a some
Oh,
shooters around them. Yeah, a Kennard or a Wood.
yeah,
Um,
actually,
I think
I think
you go.
the big question mark we landed on was just their guard rotation.
Hmm.
Like it's probably going to be some version of Killian Hayes, Derrick Rose, Zaire Smith, and Rodney McGruder on the floor at any time. Which, if you want to look at this sort of two bigs that can pass offense, uh, an aging Derrick Rose and a rookie point guard are probably one of the better combinations that you could run that with, just in terms of like, okay, we're not limiting options for like Derrick Rose isn't exactly the most pass first point guard in the league. Killian Hayes, I'm assuming, is going to take some time to adjust to the game.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I guess this is what the Pistons are looking for.
Yeah, they got Sadiq Bey. He's a
Yeah,
good 3-and-D
actually,
guy. I mean, we think he's a good 3-and-D guy.
yes, he's one of like millions of draft prospects where it's like, well, his shot looks fine. He can kind of like he's 6'8" with a wingspan. So let's see where this goes.
Yeah, and I felt like that was a big theme of this year's draft. There was like 5 or 6 different prospects in the top 15 who everyone was saying like this guy could be a great 3-and-D guy.
And like do you think that's a side product of just we didn't have the NCAA tournament, so we didn't have those guys that like jumped out at us on those big
Mm.
stages, or do you think that was just always going to be the focus of this draft?
It's got to be partially that I think, and like you said, I think there's, um, as we've seen in these like important playoff games, how
Yeah.
important a guy like that is, how important a guy like Crowder or Danny
Oh yeah.
Green, you know, these guys who are always going to be playing the last 5 minutes of an important game.
Yeah.
Um, they we got to stock up on them, and
Sacrificing touches from other players.
yeah, and you got to figure out how. I don't know, but I just don't understand. Like Bruce Brown was a good 3-and-D guy who I don't think is
Yeah.
very old, right?
No, he's young. Luke Kennard was another one. Like
Yeah,
16 points a game last year, 44, 39, 89 shooting, getting to the line more. Like he was kind of breaking out. And I don't know. I guess the thinking there was he's headed towards like a restricted free agent offer that we don't want to match.
yeah,
Which this is where I get to the flawed logic though, where it's like, okay, we know if it was a Luke Kennard heading for an offer sheet that's going to be too much for us, why are you then turning around and saying 3 years, 60 mil for Jeremy Grant? and 3 years, 25 mil for Plumlee. Like it
Yeah.
just, I don't know where the consistency is there. And this is why I think the Pistons are where they are, because they have that lack of consistency ideologically.
Definitely. I mean, you have like the Dwayne Casey system is what you play tough. It's like I think Casey's never been like a big like X's and O's guy, and is more of like a team identity, grit and grind type of thing. And I guess that's what they're trying to create, just like a tough team of good defenders. But I don't know. It's hard to think about it until we actually see it on the floor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think,
And
and
hey,
with
ultimately, it's the Pistons. Like we
yeah,
don't expect the most from them right now, or ever really.
yeah,
So like good but clearly limited might just be a spot they're comfortable being in.
and there's also always the possibility that Christian Wood just didn't want to come back to the Pistons. I think people are giving them a lot of flack um, for losing him and losing him for such a cheap price to Houston. But
Yeah.
I mean, Christian Wood primarily played the four for them.
Yeah.
Primarily played the four when Blake was injured.
Yeah.
Blake's healthy again, allegedly.
For now.
And I mean, it's kind of crazy if you look at those games when Blake was injured. Christian Wood was averaging like 23 and 8 or something on like really really good efficiency, and showed that he's a really really talented offensive player. And he probably saw
Yeah.
Blake coming back and was like, I'm not going to be able to thrive here.
Or alternatively, he saw similar money on the table, or even like slightly less money on the table to live in Houston versus living in Detroit, and just
Mhm.
decided, you know what? I think I'd rather live in Houston year round, which understandable logic.
Yep. And then
I
if
think
Harden and Westbrook get traded,
he's the guy.
yeah,
We're the
number one
Christian.
option.
Let's do it.